The bell above the diner door chimed the way it always did, a small, tired sound that matched the place. Vinyl booths with cracked seams, a counter that had seen better decades, and the smell of coffee that never quite left the air. Emily sat near the window, her wheelchair angled carefully so she didn't block the aisle. She liked that booth because sunlight reached it in the afternoons, warming her hands while she waited for her grilled cheese and tomato soup. It was a routine she depended on, a small pocket of normal that helped her feel like the world wasn't always rushing past her. She was 16 and had learned early how to be invisible when she needed to be. Her legs didn't work the way other people's did, and her left hand shook when she was nervous. Most days people pretended not to notice. Some days they stared. Rarely, someone smiled and asked her name. Today, she was hoping for invisibility. She had a math test tomorrow and her head was full of numbers, not people. The door opened again and 3 teenagers came in, loud before they were even fully inside. 2 boys and a girl, backpacks slung low, laughter spilling everywhere. They dropped into the booth behind Emily's, kicking the seat hard enough to jolt her forward. She gripped the edge of the table, soup sloshing dangerously close to the rim. No apology came. Their laughter only got louder. Emily stared at her hands, willing them to be steady. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a kind voice, glanced over but didn't say anything. The diner was half full, mostly regulars who knew how to mind their own business. Emily told herself it would be fine if she just stayed quiet. It didn't stop there. One of the boys leaned over the back of the booth and flicked Emily's hair. "Hey, you dropped something," he said, snickering. Emily didn't answer. Her cheeks burned, and she focused on breathing the way her physical therapist had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The girl with them rolled her eyes. "She probably can't even hear you," she said, though Emily clearly could. The words landed heavier than the kick had. Emily felt the room shrink, the walls pressing closer, the sounds blurring together. When the waitress brought the food, one of the boys reached out and tapped the tray, sending the spoon clattering to the floor. "Oops," he said, not bothering to hide his grin. Emily bent to pick it up, her hand shaking more now. As she straightened, the same boy stood suddenly and slapped her across the face. The sound was sharp and final, louder than the bell on the door. Emily froze, shock rooting her to the spot. Her face burned where his hand had landed, and tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. The diner went silent for a heartbeat that felt endless. "What are you gonna do about it?" the boy said, his voice low and cruel. "Run after me?" Something inside Emily cracked. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She just sat there, tears sliding down her cheeks, staring at the table like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The waitress rushed over, her face pale, telling the kids to leave, threatening to call the police. They laughed as they backed toward the door, throwing insults over their shoulders, the bell chiming again as they disappeared into the afternoon. Emily stayed where she was long after they were gone. The waitress offered ice, offered to call someone, but Emily shook her head. She wanted to go home, but she couldn't bring herself to move yet. Her hands trembled, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Around her, the diner slowly returned to its usual hum, but something had changed. The air felt heavier, like everyone was carrying the moment with them. An hour passed. Emily wiped her face and paid for her meal, barely tasting a bite of it. She was still sitting there when the door opened again, the bell chiming under a very different weight. This time, the sound of engines rolled in with them. The diner door opened wide, and the bell rang again, nearly drowned out by the low rumble of motorcycles being shut off outside. The sound lingered, vibrating through the floor, settling into the walls. Emily looked up, her heart skipping, not in fear this time but in confusion. They came in one by one, heavy boots on tile, leather jackets creaking as they moved. There were 6 of them, men and women, faces weathered by sun and road, patches sewn onto their backs. Conversation in the diner slowed, then stopped. Even the coffee machine seemed to hush. The first biker to enter took in the room with a calm, steady gaze. He was tall, gray threaded through his beard, eyes sharp but not unkind. He nodded at the waitress like he knew her. She nodded back, relief flickering across her face. Emily noticed that. She noticed how the bikers didn't swagger or shout. They simply existed, filling the space with quiet confidence. They chose a table near Emily, close enough that she could hear them speak. The gray-bearded man leaned back, crossing his arms. "Heard something happened here," he said gently, not to anyone in particular. "Someone got hurt." The waitress swallowed and glanced at Emily before speaking. "A girl," she said. "Some kids came in earlier. They were cruel." Her voice wavered. "They hit her." Emily's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected anyone else to care enough to talk about it, let alone strangers in leather jackets. She kept her eyes on the table, wishing she could disappear again. One of the bikers, a woman with short hair and a scar along her jaw, followed the waitress's gaze. She looked at Emily, really looked, not at the wheelchair but at Emily's face. Her expression softened. "That you, kid?" she asked quietly. Emily nodded, barely. The gray-bearded man stood and walked over, stopping a respectful distance away. He crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said. "No one deserves that." "You okay?" Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "I will be," she whispered. The words felt small, but they were honest. He nodded, accepting that. "We were outside when those kids ran past," he said, his voice still calm. "Laughing. One of them bragging." His eyes hardened just a fraction. "We don't like bullies." Emily felt something shift in her chest. Fear flickered, quickly followed by something warmer. She didn't ask what they planned to do. Part of her didn't want to know. The bikers didn't rush out. They ordered coffee, spoke quietly among themselves. The diner slowly relaxed, the tension easing as minutes passed. Emily finished her meal, her hands steadier now. She felt less alone than she had an hour ago. When the bikers stood to leave, the woman with the scar knelt beside Emily. "You remember this," she said softly. "People like them. They're loud, but they're small. You're tougher than you think." Emily swallowed and nodded. "Thank you." Outside, voices rose briefly, not shouting, but firm. Emily couldn't see what was happening, only heard the low, controlled tones of adults who had lived long enough to know when to draw lines. There was no crash, no violence spilling back into the diner. Just a sense that something had been set right, or at least pushed in that direction. The bikers returned a few minutes later, faces unreadable. They paid their bill and headed for the door. The gray-bearded man paused and looked back at Emily. He tapped 2 fingers to his temple in a small salute. When they left, the engine started again, then faded into the distance. Emily sat there for a long moment after, listening to the quiet. The diner felt different now, warmer somehow. The memory of the slap still hurt, but it no longer defined the day. She wheeled herself toward the door, the bell chiming softly as she went out into the sunlight. For the first time since it happened, she believed she would be okay, not because the world was suddenly kind, but because she had seen that cruelty didn't always get the last word.